Hello, everyone. Welcome to our post-game wrap-up. We're here with Gavin Verhey, who helped design these Doctor Who decks. If you guys missed our Doctor Who episode, we'll have a link in the description below where you guys can watch our team and Gavin actually pilot these new decks. Check them out for yourself, and there'll be a link in the description. All right, Gavin, so you designed all of these decks, or helped anyway. Tell me a little bit about getting to dive into what I understand is one of your favorite IPs.
Yeah, I mean, it was a dream project to get to work on and had an incredible team to do it too, right? I was the lead designer making the final calls, but I had Carmen Klimparens, Chris Mooney, Jess Dunks, Trick Jarrett, Elizabeth Rice, all there with me to help make this a reality. And they're all huge Doctor Who fans, plus people like Lauren Bond on the creative team. It was really a group effort to make this thing come true. And we're all Doctor Who fans, right? We've all watched this show a ton, and getting to dig in and be like, okay, what are our favorite bits of the show to get to bring to life was so special. And with, it's actually very fitting, right? Because this is Doctor Who's 60th anniversary this year, and it's Magic's 30th anniversary this year. So Doctor Who's been around twice as long as Magic, but it's a huge milestone for both of us. And we both have so much content, right? Magic has so much to use that it can grab old cool mechanics and bring back. Doctor Who has so much history to put in. There's just so much cool stuff to touch there. We had a blast working on it.
You guys did above and beyond as far as watching Doctor Who episodes and making sure that you got everything. And it sounds like the fans are the ones that really built the set. I'm blown away by the amount of detail that you guys have put into these. Do you have a card that is your favorite that you feel like shows that detail and fandom that you guys have for the game?
I mean, there's tons of things that I love here. I could grab basically any card from the decks and tell you a long story about its creation. But one that I think is a cool story that's really meaningful to me is all the way back in Modern Horizons 1, there was this card that we were trying out for Modern where you drew from the bottom of your library. It was like an anti-Lantern of Insight card. So when that the Lantern deck was popular, you could do that, but it didn't work out for a variety of reasons. It had some challenges. It had some digital issues too. So we tabled it. And I thought it was a funny idea, so I put it into Mystery Booster. If you know your Mystery Booster playtest cards, Lantern of Undersight is this card that most people will probably not remember, but lets you draw from the bottom of your library. But I always thought it was cool, and I always thought maybe someday it could work in real Magic. Well, smash cut many years later, I'm working on Doctor Who, and I have to design this character called River Song. Now, River Song, if you don't know the character, it's a fan favorite character because it plays with time travel so well. It's actually a really tragic story. What happens is the Doctor meets River for the first time, and the Doctor has no idea who River is. He's never met her before. He's like, who is this person? However, River knows all about who he is. And what's happened is she's met him out of order. And she's already met other incarnations of him that we will see in the future, but it's his first time meeting her. Huh. And at the end of that, spoilers, it's a great episode, but at the end of that episode, River dies. Okay, so she's dead. She's gone. And as the show continues over many years, we keep meeting River at earlier points in her timeline as the Doctor is meeting her at later points in his timeline, right? Until at the very end, after many years of their story, finally, it's the last time the Doctor meets River and the first time the River meets the Doctor. So it's this very tragic thing where that's gonna be the last time you ever see this character. And at the very beginning, that she dies. But she carries around this journal that is full of what they've done together. So there's always a lot of hinting back and forth. Anyway, it's very, very, it's a great storyline. But because they're moving in time in the opposite direction, I was like, this could be the perfect point to do the draw from the bottom of your library mechanic. And I pitched it around. Everyone's like, let's give it a roll here. And it stuck. And that's why River lets you draw from the bottom of your library. And to me, it's a great example of finding this perfect, flavorful incarnation of this mechanic in a really new and unique way we probably would not have done if not for this collaboration.
Honestly, the Doctor Who fan service for each of these cards, even just the basic cards that have, redone art like Soul Ring, I cannot imagine the amount of little Easter eggs that people can find who are really into Doctor Who. I would have never made that connection with that card. And that is just a wonderful way to bring a new IP into Magic.
For sure. So we have a reprint card, Farewell. We know what Farewell does. We've seen before, but the art for this card is the 10th Doctor regenerating into the 11th Doctor, which is this super iconic, super emotional moment for Doctor Who fans, right? That is, if you want to cry, if you should watch that scene, right? If you need to get a good cry. And so I remember when I previewed that card, when that card was previewed and people were talking about it, people were just like, I love and hate you at the same time right now. Like, it's got so much emotion. And it's a Magic card. It's this big. It's got a static piece of art on it. The fact that someone can see it and flash back to that moment a decade ago when they were watching that episode and feel those emotions, like, that's powerful stuff. So connecting your game to these things that you experienced yourself, that's really, really moving. And I'm so happy we got to do that with these Commander decks.
So not only did you make new cards that fit into the IP, you also took existing cards that fit and reworked the art to bring them in there, because Farewell is a wonderful name for the scene that you just described.
Right, yeah. One of the first things we did, actually, one of the early things we did in design, is we looked through existing Magic cards and tried to see ones that could fit our archetypes well, right? Given the decks we have, what are some things we could bring in? And while there's a ton of new cards in these decks, because a lot of the themes just needed new cards to work, there's a handful of ones that we thought were just perfect, like Clock Spinning. What a great name, right? As Foretold, a popular card and really fitting for this IP. And so we wanted to bring some of those in here, and I was really happy with a lot of the choices we ended up with. There's also some that are just very charming to me, because I was like, oh, this would be so cool to do this. So two that I love in particular is there's Thespian Stage, which there's an episode where the Doctor goes to visit Shakespeare. So we did it as the Globe Theater, which is really, really cool. And there's War Room in one of the Commander decks, which the Doctor is friends with Winston Churchill, and they go and visit their war room in World War II. And we showed off that war room on the card. So it's stuff like that, which is really charming ways to show off for the first time, like, these iconic locations that you would so associate with this place on a reprint card.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing some of your insight with me. I'm going to pass it over to Veggiewagonyee, who's going to ask you some more specific card and fandom questions.
Cool transition.
I know this is going to be kind of awkward, kind of tough, because we are two guys that aren't really good at talking a bunch. So I'll do my best.
That's just me.
And of course, the people want to know, who's your doctor and who's your companion?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm a fan of so many doctors, but the 10th Doctor is my doctor. It's when I started watching the show, totally fell in love with it. And I mean, I loved 11, who came after him. Of course, Matt Smith was great. And Capaldi, like Superman Raid, I could go through also, of course, sorts of doctors. But 10, I mean, I'm wearing a David Tennant suit right now, right? Like, I can't say no to the 10th Doctor. And then in terms of favorite companion, I mean, it's probably a boring answer, but I love Donna. I just love the vibe they have together. I love that it's not a romantic thing. They're just like, truly mates hanging out, and they're so funny. I'm really glad that we get David Tennant and Catherine Tate back this year for the anniversary, which is super exciting. But I will say, I think most underrated companion, who I really do love, does go to Martha. She did not get enough time, and she is fantastic. And I would love to see them do more stuff with her.
Yes, yeah, she is my favorite, and I'm like, particularly because that it's like, okay, you did that much in like that little time, like, if you can shine that hard with what you're given, like, yes.
Yeah, she's awesome. How about you?
I'm a Ninth Doctor guy. I'm a Ninth Doctor guy. I like the contrast between like, leather jacket comes off kind of tough, but then like being able to just jump to super goofy. Like, if you look at any of the other Doctors, immediately like, all right, this is a goofy look, but I really enjoyed that contrast. What about villain?
Villain? Well, I do know a thing or two about villains if you just watch the episode, that's for sure. Wow. So one thing I think Doctor Who does really well are villains that play on the senses, right? If you look at the Silence, for example, it plays on what you can see in memory. If you think about the Weeping Angels, it once again plays with what you can see. So I love those kind of villains that play with your senses. I don't, Blink's my favorite episode, so it's hard to not say the Weeping Angels. They're one of my favorites. Although, as I dug into Doctor Who's past to try and pick characters to put in the villains deck, I gotta say I really appreciated the story of the Veil Yard. The Veil Yard, for those who don't know, is from a sixth Doctor serial called Trial of a Time Lord, where basically he puts the Doctor on trial. As it turns out, as you might expect from someone putting the Doctor on trial, he's manipulated the data a little bit. He's got some footage manipulation there. It's not exactly like how it happened, but it's a super interesting villain. And we only ever see him there and then never again. And at some point, I would love to see him show up again, because it's a super interesting old villain. And kind of that idea of like a corrupt official is really, really interesting. And not the like, hey, in your face, I'm going to shoot a laser at you and kill you kind of thing, but I'm going to commit you for incorrect crimes and lock you up forever. It's super interesting.
You hear that, BBC? It's
we've
take
talked.
note. Take note. Yeah. To Mr. BBC.
Mr. BBC.
The sheer number of like references and jokes and characters and episodes that are represented across these 4 decks is mind-blowing. But what was the 101st card?
Oh.
What got cut that is not represented here that you were like, at the end of the day, it's got to go?
There are two. There are 2 cards that got cut very, very, very late. Well, I mean, I basically had a spreadsheet of everything. And one day I realized I had to finally call it down, pick what I was going to do. And it took a whole weekend of me like figuring out what I was going to chop out. And there were so many tough picks. And 2 that were left on the cutting room floor that I was interested in but couldn't ultimately get done were a card for Hand of Omega, which is from the older show. We get a reference to it in these precons, but we don't actually see it. And then in the newest run of the show, in the 13th Doctor's era, there's this kind of like huge group of I don't want to describe it without saying anything that's too big of a spoiler. But basically, the moral of the story is we could have made a legendary group of Weeping Angels that would have been very cool and give you a Weeping Angel legend to play with. There's a lot of Weeping Angels in these decks, but no Weeping Angels, no Weeping Angel legend. And so we talked for a while, but about doing like a black-blue Weeping Angel legend with some kind of blink mechanic, which is appropriate. But a lot of people figure that they'd want white in their blink decks, which makes sense. And white, blue, black was not an option here. We talked about it for a while, and eventually I cut it. Instead, the card that won out, because that'd be an interesting choice, because it's always easy to be like, I wish we would have had that. A card that won out, though, was Waters of Mars, was like the actual last card that made it in, which is, of course, a super iconic thing from a very iconic episode. So, I was pretty happy to get Water of Mars in there. And maybe someday else we'll do a cool Weeping Angel commander.
Yeah. So we have all the face commanders for these decks. What would you build first that is not one of these face commanders?
Oh man, there's so many things to build. And we actually had a lot of fun playtesting and trying out different ones. A few combinations I'm really partial to are the War Doctor, which gets counters as stuff is exiled, along with Ryan Sinclair from the 12th, 13th Doctor deck. Ryan, whenever he attacks, basically flips cards from the top of your library until you hit a spell. But because of, I don't know if how many of you know this rule, but when you flip until you hit something, like when you're cascading, for example, even if a card says 1 or more, it will trigger for each card that's exiled because it exiles and checks. So if you have the War Doctor in play, which gets a counter whenever you exile 1 or more cards, and then you attack with Ryan and you exile 5 cards, that's 5 counters on the War Doctor. So it's a really cool combination. In fact, if you want a very huge meme commander deck, here's the new meme metagame.
Yeah, you've got my here.
100 lands, Ryan Sinclair, and the War Doctor. You can go turn 3 Ryan Sinclair, turn 4 the War Doctor, and then turn 5 you'll attack and deal 90 damage to somebody. Now, granted, if they kill either of your commanders, you got nothing. Okay, you are done for. But it is a hot new meme meta, so go for it.
Oh, see, you had me at meme, but
yeah. There's a ton of fun combinations. Like, there's so many cool things you can go out and build. I think Fugitive Doctor Martha Jones is really fun. That's a really awesome combination where one makes clues and then one lets you sacrifice clues, which is kind of cool. So many combinations. Like, there's so many cool things you can build here, and I'm excited for folks out there to go and try their own.
Right, you've now created the choose your own Doctor Who fanfic set.
Yeah, we very much talked about. So one of the early taglines in design was build your own episode. And whenever you leave an episode playing these precons or a game playing these precons, it feels like you watched your own unique episode of Doctor Who. And I encourage you not only do that with the precons, but also go out and tell your own stories, right? Put a Doctor and companion together that have never met in the story, and who's to say at some point they didn't, right? And go on their own wild adventure, and I think that's really fun. And transition.
Right. Oh, I'm gonna throw it over to Airball, who's gonna ask a little bit about how the Gallifreyan sausage is made.
What?
What? You don't? I thought you knew all the lore.
Yeah, they don't have sausage on Gallifrey. Don't be ridiculous.
All right, my turn. Thank you, Gavin, for spending this time with us. I had a few more questions about how the sausage is made. I'm not a huge Doctor Who fan, but big Magic fan, obviously. And I was wondering what was different about building a Universes Beyond set versus something that you have complete control over in-house. This, you need to work with other IPs. There are, I think, some more challenges involved.
Well, yeah, there are, of course, some challenges. Like, we have to run everything through by the BBC, and we, have to work with them. But honestly, I found it a really great collaboration. Like, they were an awesome partner to work with. I loved getting to work with them, and they actually provided great feedback on cards. Like, I showed them a number of things, and they were like, sometimes they're like, this is great. Most of the time they're like, this is great, awesome, love it. And every now and then they're the ones fact checking me of like, oh, actually, did you know this lore fact? And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. Like, for example, I showed them my first, I remember I was working on the Weeping Angels. Okay, so the Weeping Angels are this race into Doctor Who from space, these aliens, and they're these statues, okay? And if you're looking at them, they can't move. But the moment you blink or turn away or anything, they can move, and they move very fast coming toward you. But they've got wings. They're angels, right? And so I did so much looking around online to try and figure out if they could fly canonically or not. Like, could these angels fly? They have wings, but we never see them fly in the show, but they move fast. Who knows, right? And I spent like, I don't know, half a day trying to figure out if they could fly or not. And eventually I was like, oh, I'll put flying on the card. And then when I showed it to the BBC, they're like, oh, actually, do you know canonically Weeping Angels can't fly? And I was like, super interesting to know. You answered some of the mini fans would like to know. So Doctor Who fans out there, there's your canonical answer. Weeping Angels do not fly. But so they were great to work with. And one thing I love is I appreciate them looking through everything. On a design standpoint, while there are challenges in creating cards for an IP, as a designer, it actually gives you a great place to start, right? The restrictions in a way breed creativity and make you come up with ideas you would never come up with otherwise. So it's really cool to like look at a character and be like, okay, we need to make a top-down version of this character. What does that mean? And you end up going in places that are totally different from what you might expect, right? Like we would not normally get to a time counter commander deck. That's just not the kind of thing we would touch normally. But, well, time. I mean, it doesn't get more appropriate for Doctor Who than time itself. So we built a deck around a theme that is really resonant for Doctor Who, right? And even historic, like old Doctor Who episodes that go into the past are often called historicals by fans. So there's a really good connection there. So it kind of inspired us to do things we wouldn't normally do. And it's kind of those restrictions, I suppose, as it were, breeding creativity and also just letting us go top down with our card designs, which is really cool. So while yes, there are challenges, there's also a lot of like great design juice it gives you too as you're working on it.
So speaking of time, did you find that this set took longer to make than your average set that you have complete control over in-house, or was it about the same?
Well, it takes a lot longer. I'm going to talk from the design standpoint to start. It takes a long time because there's just so many cards, right? A normal commander deck has like 10 new cards. This has 50. It's the most we've ever put in a commander deck before. And there's a lot more to test, right? Because the more cards you add, the more things you have to figure out. So there's a lot there. And then yes, of course, when you're working with a partner, you want to make sure they can approve everything. With the actors, we needed actor likeness approval. So we needed to send all the artwork over to the actors too. So there's some stuff there that just takes more time. So yes, this took a lot more time than a normal commander deck series, but I'm really happy with the result of it. And I'm glad we went through, all those steps that we have to go through to make sure we're doing it right and proper.
So safe to say you are a Doctor Who fan?
I would hope the viewers know this by now. Surprise!
Yeah, okay. You heard it here first, everyone. Did you find that working with the BBC on this helped augment or enhance your feelings towards the IP? Like, you got to see behind the velvet rope. You got to touch the actors in a non-physical way.
It was really surreal. Like, I've been watching this show for so long. To like convey how big of a Doctor Who fan I am, I have slept on the sidewalk in San Diego to be able to get into the Doctor Who Comic-Con panel. Like in cosplay.
How long?
Like overnight, like whatever. I get in line at like 9 p.m. and then the panel's at like 3 p.m. the next day or whatever, right? Like I am deep in this and really committed to the BBC and the stuff that they've done. And so getting to work with them was really cool, right? And just being in meetings where they're candidly like, here's what we're looking at doing. Here's some of the future of Doctor Who. Here's stuff that we care about. It was so cool. It was just amazing. And to be able to learn things about like what doctors do they find are the most popular? Does it align with what I expect? Do they like what we're working on? And also to get to teach them a bit about magic has been a really cool experience.
What do you think that one most universal card would be? The one that touches everyone?
Well, I mean, when you think of Doctor Who, there's a few things that I don't want to say everyone knows, but are the most iconic of the show. You've got the TARDIS, sure, of course, which I think most people know it's this thing that goes through time. It's a ship of some kind. And the card itself allows you to both cascade and planeswalk, which is super like fitting for the TARDIS. And of course, there's some Daleks that are just like, they say exterminate or whatever on them. It's about as classic as you get, for knowing Doctor Who stuff. And then, of course, the Sonic Screwdriver, which is a mana rock that has 3 other abilities. Very fitting for a Sonic Screwdriver. So those are some things that I think most people will be likely to know. But, if you've seen a little bit of Doctor Who, there's going to be different things in here that will grab you.
Yeah. So one last question. It sounds like this kind of Universes Beyond content gives you an opportunity to touch the fan base in a way that something completely in-house doesn't. You're playing on narratives that people already have, and you can work with those to affect emotions that are more deeply ingrained than already exist in the Magic universe, say. What emotion do you want to leave people with? When people think of this set, they think of the work you did. What do you want them to think about? What feelings do you want them to be left with?
Yeah, well, I really hope people feel a sense of innovation and wonder. So much about Doctor Who is brilliance and solving problems in the nick of time and thinking outside the box and attacking problems in different ways. And these 4 decks are very unique. There's a lot of wacky stuff that can happen with the synergies in these decks. And to me, that makes it all feel like Doctor Who, right? And they are 4 themes that are a little bit off kilter. They're a little askew to what we would normally do, but it really feels a lot like Doctor Who when you're playing with them. And I hope that as you all play out there, you walk away feeling like, wow, that was a really novel experience that is not like the Magic I've played before. And hopefully you enjoy it.
Yeah, I certainly did. I came at this from the perspective of someone who's never seen an episode of Doctor Who, and I was kind of shocked at how well the decks played out and how cool it was as a Magic player seeing where you took the space.
Cool.
So
well, I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Sounds like it's working.
Well, I'm hoping that everyone will enjoy the episode. If you haven't checked it out yet, head on over to the Decked Out YouTube page. I'm sure the link will be plastered all over somewhere.
Up here
It's
somewhere, probably.
somewhere, yeah. So thank you so much, Gavin. Hopefully we have you on again in the future, and I appreciate all the work you've done on the set.
My pleasure. Thank you all so much, and enjoy the decks.